Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Rebecca Sekulich, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about some of these amazing things that you're doing, remodeling your listings and setting them up for success so that your sellers actually end up netting more money. I think that's incredibly important. And especially right now, it's incredibly timely. And we'll talk about that. But one of my favorite people in the world is a gentleman by the name of Alan Nevin. Alan is one of the top economists in the nation, happens to be in San Diego, happens to be, we've interviewed him 3 times on this podcast, big friend of our program. And Alan wrote a book back in 2017 called The Great Divide. And The Great Divide is about this massive amount of some $98 trillion, according to the government, of wealth that's being transferred from baby boomers to their millennial kids and grandkids. And so what you're doing right now is incredibly timely, and you're onto something here, and I want to make sure that we get into it. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. So nice to meet you.
So where were you born?
I was born in the hometown of Henry Ford in Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Did you grow up there?
I did my whole life, elementary, junior high, high school, and I went to Michigan State.
So you're a Spartan.
A Spartan, go green.
That's awesome.
We play Michigan this weekend, so I'm in green nails, ready to go.
Yeah, it's a big deal, man. That's one of the biggest games all year.
It is. I'm actually flying home to Michigan tomorrow. I wish I could say I was going to the Spartans game. I'm actually going to a funeral, but I'm going to the Lions game on Sunday because we're going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. You mentioned earlier that you were headed back for a funeral. So let me ask you this. Growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Dearborn?
Oh my gosh. So much, but probably my favorite thing is the city was so beautiful. On every corner or end of every block where we grew up, we had a park. And the end of our street was a cemetery, but the street over was a park. It had a little twirly slide and playground equipment, but it also had like a divot, which they filled with water in the wintertime, and it became our own ice rink. And so we skated, from the time I could stand up, we skated until, they would shine like those big engineer lights from trains, like through the windows. And we would like run extension cords, and we would run hoses and connect them together so that we could play our own Zamboni. And we just would skate hockey, and we had a lot of like lakes and rivers and streams. So we were constantly, in the water. So I feel like Dearborn was just a beautiful place. We have really high property taxes. I still own a home there, and the property taxes at my home in Dearborn, Michigan are more than my home I'm sitting in Los Angeles right now, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Especially since my parents bought their house for like $20,000, 60 years ago. The property taxes are like, more than, again, my beautiful house that I'm sitting in right now.
That's wild.
But yeah, so that in the community, and the fact that everything was, if something is a mile away, it takes you a minute to get to. If it's 5 miles away, it takes you 5 minutes. So very close in proximity. School was right there. Church was right there. We lived across the street from a country club. And we just had this community. We always saw people. We would walk into the local restaurants and bakeries before Starbucks, and everybody knew everybody. My parents would walk into the butcher, and they would be like, "Hi, Swellen and Ivan, do you want, ham steak this week, or, filet?" And they would just know. And I feel like we don't have that here. Like, life is too big and spread apart. So it's that hometown feeling that it's really hard to get without feeling like, I mean, we had about 90,000 people in Dearborn when I was growing up. I guess there's three things. There's that, and then the third thing, growing up in this historic town that not only like housed the commandant's quarters for things like the Revolutionary War. My grandmother was a DAR member, a daughter of the American Revolution.
Oh
So
my gosh.
me, a granddaughter of the American Revolution, and registered and everything. So she dressed up in her garb and went and volunteered, and she was a docent. So we had that, and then we had Henry Ford come in and Ford World Headquarters. My dad was an engineer for Ford, and we had Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village, otherwise known as the Henry Ford now. And Henry Ford went all around the country, and he plucked places like the Wright Brothers Cycle Shop out of North Carolina, and he moved it in pieces, brought it to our hometown, and made this village that we could go visit, shops and doctors' offices, and Menlo Park, where Albert Einstein, visited, and had electricity was invented, and all of these things. And it was just super cool to like walk through history. And that was part of our lives. We went there at least once a week. We went to camp. We had Christmas and Halloween and all of these wonderful things. And I just feel like my life was like one big walking history lesson.
Yeah. It had to have been inspirational.
It was awesome.
That's awesome.
I would wish I could give my kid that.
Yeah, exactly. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Probably my mom. Yep. My mom
Why?
was my mom was a one of a kind wonder. She also grew up in Dearborn, went to Michigan State. She had a degree in teaching, and she taught for a long time. I have two older brothers, and when it came time for me being born, my mom was like, a feminist. She was out there like picketing for women's rights, and she actually got pink slipped when she was 9 months pregnant. She was due in March, and she ended up having me in February. And that one moment when she was pink slipped and decided to fight, she lost her job, but she was able to stay home with me. And my brothers had caretakers, like kind of like a nanny, but not a nanny, like other grandparents that took care of them. And my mom stayed with me, sent me to preschool. But I feel like I got that walking history. She taught history, English, and a bunch of other subjects, and that I got to literally live through her. And ever since I was young, I was like just independent. She was paying attention, to my brothers, and I was just doing my own thing. And I have this, like, I always wanted to work ethic, where I was mowing lawns, I was, shoveling snow, I was babysitting, and I had a whole bunch of money saved up before I ever got out of elementary school. So whenever I wanted something, my friends were always asking their parents, hey, can we go to Toys R Us and get X? And I never really had to ask, because I always had the money that I could buy it myself. And I didn't want to ask, because my mom wasn't making hardly any money. She also was on staff at our church as an educational pastor, and making like $9,000 for the last, 10, 15 years of her career. And my dad was an automotive illustration engineer at Ford. He was a designer. And that was really cool. But we were just like middle-class people. And I just had this work ethic that I think I got from both my parents. They were constantly working and wanting our lives to be better. And they gave me every opportunity I could have ever asked for.
That's awesome. So you go to high school. In high school in Dearborn, did you have a favorite subject?
Oh, so many. Yes. Probably French.
Yeah.
Loved my French teacher, and social studies.
Isn't it amazing how teachers affect,
Oh my gosh.
like the right teacher will have the right impact, It's why I love teaching. I absolutely love it. And the thing I love the most about it is when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, right? That is absolutely so unbelievably true. And you can tell.
Yep.
You look them in the eyes and you can tell when they get it. Like the moment that they get it, right? You can't put a price tag on that. There's no way.
No.
So after high school, you decide to go to Michigan State University. Number one, why did you choose to go there? And what was your favorite thing about attending Michigan State?
Gosh. So I feel like I grew up a Spartan. My mother went to Michigan State. My grandmother went to Michigan State. My grandmother's sister went to Michigan State when it was Michigan Agricultural College, or the MAC. My aunt went to Michigan State. My cousin went to Michigan. Like there was a whole slew of us. And I
Yeah.
just grew up kind of a Spartan. My mom would take us there. We would go around the campus. She would show us like the dorm where she lived in. We'd go to the dairy and get like homemade ice cream and homemade cheese. Michigan State was an agricultural school.
Hmm.
So the cows that were on the land
Hmm.
produced the milk to make the ice cream that we ate when I was in
Hmm.
college. So it was really cool. And so the honest to God truth, I wanted to go to one of three places and I only applied to one school. And that was my mentality, is that I'm going to Michigan State. It doesn't matter. I
That's it.
applied, I got in, and I was so happy. So like that was part of the whole thing, is being, part of the family.
Hmm.
I was there, probably the best part about my life in Michigan State, so many things. It was the best 4 years of my entire life. But I was in a sorority, and I grew up in a family of boys, and my two brothers and my dad. So being in a sorority, I had instantly 50 sisters.
Yeah.
And I ended up moving into the house, and I lived there for my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and literally created bonds for life. And I am still friends with many people from high school, but the majority of my friends that I see, I spend time with, I go on vacation with, are from my sorority. And my mother was actually in my sorority, so I'm what's called a legacy.
Wow.
And my mom was the president of the Pan Hellenic Association, so she was like deep into it. Went to conferences and things, and so I also grew up with that and saw the difference that she was making in people's lives
Yeah.
after the philanthropy, the giving back, the volunteering, everything that they did was about raising money. And their
Yeah.
charity, the American Lung Association, and now it's Autism Speak. So those are two things that are super important, to us as a family.
That's cool. So you got your degree in?
Geography.
Awesome. So you get your degree in geography. Where do you
Yes.
go from there?
Well, that's an interesting story, because I went to Michigan State to study law. I was poli-sci pre-law, and I just didn't like it. And when I was a sophomore, I was getting my wisdom teeth removed, and I had to miss some class, and I had to make up some exams. And so I had to go to my geography professor, which was a requirement for the poli-sci program, and ask him if I could make up this exam. And I remember there being 575 people in this class. That's a lot of people. Like,
Yeah.
unheard of, right? And the very first day, I sat in the back row at a table where there was like a stadium type seating. And by the end of the third week, I was in the front row, because my geography teacher looked like James Earl Jones. He was
Mhm.
this big guy, and he had that deep, deep voice, and he was like mesmerizing. And I was so enamored by his teaching and the way he inspires. I like wanted to go to class. And so
Mhm.
I go to make up the exams for my wisdom teeth, and he said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I said, I'm, going to be a lawyer." And he's like, "How's that going?" I'm like, "Oh, I can't stand poli-sci. I hate
Mm.
economics." And he's like, "Why do you want to be a lawyer?" I go, "I really don't." And he's like, "What's your favorite class?" I go, "Yours." And he goes, "Oh, you're just saying that." I go, "No." He asked me why. And I told him, and he said, "Look, I'm going to hand you a phone number. I'm going to make a phone call. Go see this woman and tell her I sent you." I'm like, "Who is it?" He's like, "Just, would you do this for me? I'm giving you 3 makeup exams right now. You're going to get an A in this class because you're amazing. And go see her. Go to this woman. She's a department head of geography. She gives me a bunch of tests. Like, I do spatial relations and all the stuff. And she's like, you were a born geographer. Like 1 in 1,000 people can not, and that's not passing these tests, but have the perception that you have, and
Mhm.
you can see things that other people can't. I'd like to call myself a genius, but it's not true. It's just I just have that from probably my dad's engineering tactical side.
Yeah.
So I ended up switching my major, and I'll never forget going home and telling my parents, "Well, I have some news."
Yeah.
And they're like, "What's going on?" I said, "I'm don't want to be a lawyer." "Okay, what's your degree?" "In geography and cartography." And my mom knew what that was, but my dad's like, maps?" And I said, "Yes." And my mom says, "What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "You know what? I don't know." And instead of saying something negative, she turned the whole conversation around. She goes, "Well, at least you could end up teaching, and you would be darn good at that." And they were very supportive of me. I graduated in geography. And when I was a junior, I was offered a job at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Environmental Quality in Land and Water Management. And I drove like 90 miles from East Lansing to Livonia,
Hmm.
and made more money at this job than some of my people here in California 25 years later are making. I was
Hmm.
making like $30 an hour and this was like, in the mid 90s. That was a lot of money to a college
Mhm.
student. And I worked there for 6 years. And this is where everything changed. We had a Democratic governor who was awesome. And then we turned a Republican governor who was all about killing animals and ruining the environment. And my good colleagues came to me and said, you have a choice right now. You're graduating. They will offer you a full-time job you've already worked here for 4 years. You can walk right in and you can retire in 30 years from now with a pension and a bunch of money and great benefits. But we're facing a governor who wants all the work we've been doing, he wants to ruin. And I would get out before there's not a job offer. So I just said, thank you so much for this wonderful experience. And I am going to, go do something else. And I
Mhm.
actually resigned, and it was like super empowering to make that decision, because somebody else would have been like, this is a lot of money. Now I'm on a salary, but it just seemed too easy. And I don't ever take the easy way out, I guess.
Mhm.
So stopped that job. And when I was at Michigan State, I mean, there's this story I could go on forever, Mike, but what I will tell you is when I was at Michigan State, I made a film. And my partner and I, she was the director, I was the producer. She wrote and directed this film, handed me a film script and said, read this. I'd never read one. And it moved me. Like, I remember there were some tears flowing down my face. I said, what do you want to do with this? She goes, I want to make this movie. I said,
Mm.
okay, great. Like, when? And she goes, now. And I want to know if you want to help. And it turned into, we spent time raising the money, and we made this movie. And we started in 1994. We finished in 1997. And long story short, it got picked up for distribution by Discovery, like the Discovery Channel, Discovery Education, in 1999. And that was what catapulted me from getting from Michigan to here. And in the meantime, after the Department of Natural Resources job, I was hired because of my film experience. If you can believe this, I was put on an emergency credential, and I was teaching film, French, and geography, and any other subject. And I was coaching varsity volleyball at the high school that I went to. So I
In
would
Michigan.
in Michigan.
Okay.
So I went to Dearborn High. I taught at Dearborn High, and I was coaching volleyball at Henry Ford Academy, which was the high school down the street attached to the Henry Ford Museum.
Right.
And right mid-semester in March of 99, the film got picked up. And I had a dear friend of mine who I credit for the reason me moving out here, call me every day, and had a phone in the office. And nobody had a phone back then. I had an actual like landline in my film office. And she'd call me and she's like, when are you moving to California? When are you moving to California? And there was just this little voice in me that, felt like Michigan, that I was bigger than that. I didn't know how or why, but it just felt like I needed to take a chance and take a risk.
Yeah.
And so I literally said, okay. And I went to the Dearborn Public Schools and asked them if I could take a leave, and I would come back for my kids' graduation. And, they hear film and opportunity, and they're like clapping, articles written. And so they're like, yes, be our guest and come back, for in the fall. So I left, came back for my kids' graduation, and I was going to come back in the fall. And I got out here, and within about 3.5, 4 weeks of me getting here, one of the same friend who called me, her dad was somebody really important in Dearborn. He was the president of the Automotive Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
And one of his previous girlfriends, who he was still friends with, her parents were divorced, owned a temp agency in Los Angeles. And so he called her, we called her, and she got us all these cool jobs. I was working for so many fun, famous people. And then about a month into being here, I got this call, and she said, look, this educational production company that's nationwide is looking for somebody. You should go interview with them. I went and interviewed with them. They offered me a job on the spot. They offered me a salary 3 times what I was making teaching. And Mike, I thought it was rich. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. And you don't say no to these opportunities. I was taught
Yeah.
growing up not to say no. So I said yes. And that's where I was at. It was now I can move forward if you want to keep asking questions, but like, that's how I got here. And I was at that production company for 6 years.
Yeah.
And then we got to pivot to how I got from there to here. But
Right. So in that company, in that production company, what was your favorite thing about working there?
oh my gosh, the people I met.
Yeah.
The woman that hired me, she is still my friend. She lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and she's in her 70s. And I remember I felt like I was looking in a mirror of like my older sister or my mother, of the person who was hiring me. There was this synergy with us, and we are still very close. You know, she's still working in her 70s, and I feel like that was the person that brought me in. And a bunch of those people that I still work with, I still talk to. We have a Facebook group. We meet several times a year. I mean, I was there for 6 years, and it's like different era. We barely had cell phones. We were still on chat, and I got to go and travel. So they hired me and to handle the territory of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. So
Hmm.
they sent me back home, all expenses paid. I was driving a Lincoln Town car. I had, an expense account. I got to take my friends, my family to dinner, and I got to drive all over, my home state
Mhm.
and present what they were selling all over. And I thought that was so cool because
Yeah.
they paid for me to travel and I got to see my parents and all of my friends. So that's why I stayed for 6 years. But then again, there was just certain things where I was like, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? And there's just
Right.
that backseat driver, that inner voice that was telling me, no, this is not what I was born to do. This is not what I was raised to do. What's next? And to go into what's next, I got another opportunity by a friend of a friend, was making another film. She handed me another script, and that script was very in line with the film that I made at Michigan State. And somebody super famous, a household name that I can't say, but everyone knows. Like, I'll pretend it was Taylor Swift was the executive producer. It wasn't, but the same sort of concept was the executive producer of this film. I stopped working, and for 2 years, I was producing this film.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the Taylor Swift of the executive producer decided that her tour was going to, her album went like triple, double platinum, whatever you call it. And she went on like 125 city tour and sort of left us.
Hmm.
And after 2 years of not getting a paycheck, this is where the magic happened. I was crushed. I mean, we were going to make a feature film about a very subject that was near and dear to my heart, that was going to make a difference in this world.
Mhm.
Person left us, and now I have no money and I have no job.
Hmm.
And the director said to me, you have two choices. You can go out and try to get a film job, or you can try to do something else. And I said, I just need money coming in. Let's do some
Yeah.
side hustles. I started selling things on eBay. I started selling things on Craigslist, just making money to pay my rent and make ends meet. And so she said, I have these friends and they're in real estate and they're looking for someone. I said, no, 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 well, I don't want to do real estate or whatever. She's like, it's not like that. It's different. They're doing something else with real estate. Please go talk to them. They're wonderful people. I reluctantly said yes. I went and interviewed with them. They told me what they wanted to do. They wanted to do like a newspaper, like, on the street corners, like the
Mhm.
newspaper boxes. They wanted to do a real estate newspaper called Real Estate Today.
Mhm.
And being a film producer, I can analyze numbers and things very quickly. And I said, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for a return on an investment. You're going to spend money, and the only way we're going to get money back is by having people advertise and pay us. It's
Yeah.
going to take a long time for that to happen. So thank you so much for the opportunity, but I am going to pass. And I love you guys. I appreciate you. Please, let's stay in touch. And we hugged, and I said goodbye. I said I turned down another opportunity. 3 days later, the husband part of that team called me and said, Rebecca, we can't stop thinking about you. We love you. Like, they actually said on the phone, we love you. Would you come in and meet with us? We don't care. How much do you want us to pay you? We want you with us, and we
Hmm.
will go away from the newspaper thing. This is what we're doing. And they ended up being the first people to bring a huge franchise in real estate that we all know, everyone knows who it is,
Mhm.
into Los Angeles. And they ended up building several offices, and I became their director of operations. And I ended up helping to put together 19 offices for this real estate brokerage.
Wow.
And all the way from Newport Beach up to Pacific Palisades. So all of those offices, most of them still exist.
Mhm.
I help put together everything. It's just building an office is just like making a movie. It's the
Mm.
same with different players. And what I was able to do is help them save money. They were hiring a general contractor, and the general contractor was making like 50% of the markup. And then as I was looking, just like a producer, at the line where all the money was going, this light bulb went off. And it was
Mhm.
like, wait a second, you're paying $1 million to build this, infrastructure for a building. The contractor's getting 600 grand, but the subs are only getting 400. What if I cut the contractor out?
Mhm.
And that's where they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, I've got a guy that can lay tile in the foyer. I got a guy that I know from this other job that can build cabinets. What if I just hired them directly and we
Mhm.
have the general contractor overseeing the project? And literally, it was genius.
Mm.
I ended up saving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for these owners, and then everybody else got wind of it. Well, how are they doing it? So they didn't build 19 offices, but I got referred to other people who I interviewed with. And at one time, I had 7 of these real estate brokerage offices being built all in Southern California. And I was going from job to job, like every day. I was going to each one of them. So I was getting 7 paychecks every 2 weeks. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And it kept saying to me, you should get your license. You should get your license. And I did not want to get my license. And then, you know how real estate offices work. I don't know, what your brokerages you've been with in the past, but they all have different models. They're tied into escrow and title and all these things. So they were thinking their next moneymaker was opening up a real estate school. So they
Mhm.
said, we hired this guy to run a real estate school and we want you to run it with him. There's one little caveat, Rebecca. You can't help out with the real estate office unless you have your license. So reluctantly, I'm going to come out right now and tell something I've never told before on live television or a podcast or anything. But they hired me and I thought, well, I still don't want to be an agent. The books came. I remember the pile of books came to the office and I never opened one of them. I took a couple practice exams and I'm just like, they're like, well, let's see if you can go past the test. I thought it was really smart. I went in, guess what? Failed. I failed the real estate exam. I've never said that out loud. And I was very hurt and embarrassed, but I also realized I never picked up a book. I never studied. I took a couple hours of practice exams.
Mhm.
It's all a bunch of stuff we don't need to know. Like, who cares how many acres are in a hectare? Nobody cares. And that's not really stuff that we're using. So it's more like, studying for the bar or getting your contractor's license.
Yeah.
So 6 weeks later, I pivoted. I laser sharp focused on the end game. I opened the books, I studied, took a bunch of practice exams, retook the exam and practiced. Got my license in October of 1990.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.